Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, the show that gives you a virtual seat at the bar for the real conversations that happen between entrepreneurs. I'm interviewing all kinds of business owners, from those just a few years into freelancing to CEOs helming 9-figure companies. If you've ever worried that everyone else just seems to get it and you're missing something or messing things up, this show is for you. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and let's get to it. Hey, and welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. With me today is my new friend, Dan Nicholson. Say hi.
Hi. How was that?
Yeah, I think that was fantastic. Tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Well, what I like to tell people is I'm a business person.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to say that because it's like the vaguest thing possible. So that people like, yeah, I usually get to like, cool, that was the vaguest thing possible. What do you actually do?
Do they think you're in an MLM or something?
Right. Well, I do a couple of different things. My first kind of full-time foray into business is running what I call a non-conventional accounting firm.
Mm.
And this is why I start with business person, because if people hear accountant or accounting firm or anything, they're like, oh, got it. So you're actually the most boring person in the room right now. So I try to like ease into it and show a little bit of personality before the complete judgment is formed.
Oh, man.
But so I have what I call a non-conventional accounting firm. And then I have a couple businesses that are under this umbrella of what I call financial certainty. So I have a certification called Certainty U and an app called the Certainty app. And all three of those businesses are in a way interrelated also.
Oh, yeah. I think that, and funnily enough, I understand this kind of persistent myth that there are certain personality types in different industries. But you're telling me about if you announce that you're an accountant, people make these assumptions about your personality. And I'm just thinking about all of the CPAs that I know, all of whom are ridiculously fun people. One of them, when I went to Santa Fe last year, she dragged me to a place called Meow Wolf. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's like crazy interactive art exhibit. And like we were sliding face first into an interdimensional dryer. It was bizarre and fun. There's another guy who calls himself the heavy metal accountant who's usually up on chairs at conferences dancing. I'm like, no, accountants are some of the most fun people I know. So y'all got to get with it. Don't make these assumptions.
You're meeting the one percenters.
Maybe those are the kinds that are gravitating toward my kind of intense personality too. That could be a little bit of a underwear on fire with the folks that are a little bit more tame. So that's awesome. How did you get to where you are with accounting? I imagine you didn't start with the business in mind. Yeah,
a really roundabout way. So I was kind of a contradiction growing up. Maybe I still am, of this like painfully shy kid with a speech problem. And that just made me even more shy.
Oh,
bad teeth, all the things. I got pretty good teeth now, thanks to my parents and braces. But also always was scheming on business ideas, mostly bad business ideas. And I was running the numbers at like 9. This dates me too. Running the numbers at 9 of like, here's how much I think I could make on a paper route. Of course, no kids have paper routes now, but I was doing all sort of scheming around that. Fortunately, my parents told me I needed to be 13 before I could have a paper route. And I called them on that. So always kind of scheming. At the same point, kind of shy. Ended up, first person in my family to go to college, ended up going thinking I was going to be a marketing major because I did DECA. If you're familiar with DECA, this whole marketing thing. I like found myself and all this new confidence. I'm like, I'm going to do marketing. This is cool. And at the end of my freshman year, I ended up getting this job at UPS, United Parcel Service, big shipping company. As a finance supervisor managing like 25 auditors. There's a whole weird story on that. But that led me to ultimately get recruited by the accounting department. And they sold me on this vision of all the cool things you can do in accounting. And hey, look at all these Fortune 500 CEOs who also have accounting degrees. And this is going to be the best skill set for you to be an entrepreneur. And I totally bought into that narrative. And then they nominated me for this fellowship at the board that writes all the accounting standards in the U.S. And like first person in my family to go to college, painfully shy kid. It's like, I can't turn away this opportunity. And so that put me on this whole path of being the guy who helped write an accounting standard, uh, and kind of being miserable in my career for
Mm.
several years before I finally embraced, hey, I'm pretty good at this accounting thing, it turns out. And there's an opportunity to do something different in the CPA space. And so that's where I finally gave myself permission to just go full time into being an entrepreneur.
Nicely done. I love that little segue too. Gave yourself permission. That's what we're all about here. Permission to kick ass. I wrote down so many notes when you were just talking because I find it funny how many people I've spoken to on the show who had those entrepreneurial tendencies early as kids.
Mm-hmm.
I was just writing a story the other day about how I used to, I might date myself here too. You remember Highlights magazine?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
In
yeah.
the back of
I would love to go to
Highlights,
the dentist or something just because they had Highlight magazine or the
oh yeah,
doctor.
like Spot the Difference and all those crazy things.
Yeah, that was the best part about all those doctor's appointments is they had highlights in the waiting room.
Oh yeah, and in the back of one of those, I believe they had this ad for Olympia Sales Club. I remember the very '90s tastic ad about write in and you can join Olympia Sales Club. And so I did door-to-door sales when I was like 10.
Okay. Yeah.
And the prize I was after wasn't like a phone or a bike. I really wanted this cool clock radio so I could listen to the radio in my room. Just like my own radio was the thing. And it was funny that I was like, I didn't even think about how that had manifested. Like, I want money. I'm going to join this sales club. I'm going to go find a way to make money. And then later on in school, I would be making keychains. I would bake with my mom, who's a pastry chef at home. And I would bring baked goods and sell them at school. And I don't even know what the profit margin on that stuff was because my mom bought all my supplies. But man, I felt rich with that $10 in my pocket.
Oh, yeah. Those are great profit margins, actually. You get somebody else to pay for the expenses and you get to keep all the money. Perfect.
It's brilliant, right? Couldn't we all just be kid business owners?
Yeah. My daughters pitch me these business ideas all the time, which I love, but they all involve me. Like, so we're going to like go to Joann Fabrics and you're going to buy all the stuff and or we're going to go to the grocery store and like, you're going to buy all the stuff, but then we're going to sell it and it's going to be awesome.
And we're going to keep all the money too, by the way.
Yeah. My oldest daughter's pretty sweet and she's like, we can donate 25%.
Oh, very, very generous, very practical. I like that. It's an early entrepreneur. I'm glad you're encouraging that with the kids too. That's just great to see. And I know that one of the things that you said that caught my attention too was like kind of falling into this career path, being recruited for it, and then recognizing that you were feeling miserable and that there was an opportunity to do something different. Like that really stuck out to me, especially since so many people I work with get stuck on this idea of I can't go do that because hundreds of other people, dozens of other people are already doing the same thing. What's different about me? Like, go make your own difference. Go be you. It's fine.
I think it's a really unfortunate, back to like creativity and my kids, there's this whole process, formal education, and so much of society reinforces conforming and lose creativity along the way. I'm not trying to make a broad, sweeping political statement here, but we all sort of have these things reinforced. I went to a Jesuit school, so I joke that I was educated in Catholic guilt, and got a degree in Catholic guilt. But we kind of get this. We lose our creativity oftentimes, and we just end up kind of feeling miserable because of it. And I think we're at this inflection point right now, especially with AI, where distinction has never been more important.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you brought that up too, because I work in the marketing industry and there are a lot of folks, particularly in copywriting and in graphic design, who are freaking out about the engines now, the AI technology that can create all of these crazy graphics, that can create all of the like very long, very detailed sales messages, sales pages in just a matter of minutes. And there are a lot of people that are freaking out about, oh my God, this is the end of copywriting. And I'm like, no, it's not. I mean, if you're mediocre and there's nothing that you can point to that is like unique, distinct, a special value that only you provide, yeah, you're probably in danger. You haven't done that differentiation work exactly like you said.
There's so many fields, copywriting. I'm not an expert necessarily in that space, but so many fields like that, legal, where it's like, you've been dining on copy paste on these
Yep.
LLC agreements for like 30 years. And we all kind of knew it, but we kind of had to accept those terms because we didn't have access to it.
Yep.
But to some degree, the AI type stuff, it removes some of the fluff. And now you have to add in your distinction. I call it playing your game. And lean into your natural strengths. We spend so much time as humans focused on the things that are wrong with us. And I would make this whole argument to you about how we're wired to do that. I think there's a lot of neuroscience that supports why we spend so much time like focused on what's wrong with us.
Oh, absolutely.
And that prevents us from doing something extraordinary. When you study the people who've done things that are extraordinary, it's like they were weirdos before we called them eccentric. We just call them eccentric now because they're billionaires. But they were playing their game well before, and that's what contributed to them getting the results that they have now.
Yeah. And to an extent, I think they shook off the mantle or the pressure to conform, exactly like you said. I know I was recording with someone earlier today named Lori, and she kind of made an offhand comment on I'm lazy and started laughing. And I said, lazy? Nope. We're going to rant about this. Laziness is a superpower. I want to hire lazy people who get stuff done because they're going to find the quickest, cheapest, most efficient way to get something done so that they can go back to their natural state of being. I am embracing becoming a lazy entrepreneur so that I can just show up and do what I do as efficiently as possible and get back to life.
There's so much power in taking a nap.
Yes. Naps are my favorite.
And just that, if you're not sure what to do next, just go take a nap, because you sitting and staring at the screen isn't necessarily getting you closer to what you want. Like, you're better served than taking a break and coming back to it. Of course, hustle culture teaches us. And I have this whole social media campaign right now. I just call it Dan versus social media. And you might appreciate this. So I bought this around like Black Friday, the most recent Black Friday. I bought this package of like a year's worth of social media templates. And I haven't been super active on social media up to this point because I found a lot of the stuff was cliche. So it is, I bought like so many, it's like 800 different templates. You could post more than 2 a day. And I read through them and I cringe at so many of them because they're like, morning formula, no one's going to be successful unless you get up at 4 a.m. And then they're like, let's ignore all the evidence of all the people who get up at like 10 a.m. or night owls and are wildly successful. But so what I do is I show what I consider to be painfully cliche thing that I got from this template. And then it blows up like a little animation where that falls apart. And then I show my rewritten version of it. It's like, it'll have like a morning formula. Like, I got to get up at 4 a.m. and then you got to do this at 6 a.m. and this and then that blows up and I just change it to like, it depends on each one of those.
I had somebody once, so you went through this process and booking to get on the show, but I only record on Wednesdays. And we were actually talking about this right before I started recording, that I record in batches, several episodes a day. And I did have one person who wanted to book into the show that like the next few Wednesdays wouldn't work. So they were like, could you do it like 9 a.m. on Wednesday or maybe a Tuesday or Thursday? And I was like, nope, Tuesday, Thursday's out. Wednesday's recording day. We can book into the future if you need to find a Wednesday that works for you. That's totally good. And I don't record in the mornings unless I sound like a diva. At the risk of sounding like a diva, you don't want me to record at 9 in the morning either. I'm not a pleasant person before I've had that coffee and a chance to unwind. We don't record in the morning for a reason, my friends.
Well, you have to, again, I just come back to that. You have to play your game. You have to create that distinction. So now all of a sudden you're doing 9 a.m. Wednesday podcasts and you're miserable. You're no longer showing up with the same distinction. And then we wonder why we don't get the results that we want. Like, because you're playing somebody else's game. And there's so much evidence that supports that guarantees you just built a system that guarantees you won't get what you want.
Right. Because you've built it according to what works for somebody else. I'm all for trying somebody else's method to see if it works for me, but I guarantee you, I am just not a 4 a.m. person. You're not going to catch me at the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning. I enjoy my sleep way too much for that. And I remember when I first went out on my own, I had this kind of story in my head about I can't wait until I've gotten to that point where I can have the long, leisurely morning routine, like 2 to 3 hours to just wake up, have coffee, not be in a rush to anywhere. And that's how I would like to start my day. And one day on the road in 2021, it just hit me. I don't have a definition, for one, of what someday looks like, what that finish line looks like, what that checklist is that got me to the point of leisurely morning routine. So I'm never going to get there because I haven't even bothered to find it. Two, do I actually need a checklist or could I just start now?
I have a lot of thoughts about what you just shared.
Go for it.
To a large degree, what you just shared is what my book that I wrote recently called Rigging the Game is about.
Ooh.
And I have this whole certification. I mentioned certain to you in the beginning. My whole certification program kind of comes back to this thing that I call the solvable problem.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do as entrepreneurs? And not even just entrepreneurs, but we go to these, we watch these TED Talks or we go to these inspirational things. They say, oh, you got to start with your why. And that sounds really nice, although it turns out a lot of us don't know what our why is. And so we have more anxiety. That's a separate conversation. But so we put together a vision board and we got like the 6-pack picture of like someone with a 6-pack abs. We got the nice home, the second home. Maybe you got a picture of some TV character that represents like your idealized version of a good parent. And you got all these things. And then you get all hopped up on dopamine and you're feeling pretty good. And so you're like, I'm going to crush all this. And maybe you get up early for the next few days and you check in with these folks 2 weeks later. And you're like, hey, how's that vision board going? You're like, yeah, I haven't really made any progress. So, and this is the problem. It's not not actually a solvable problem.
Yeah.
And this is what I mean by it. You have a bunch of things, but you don't have that. The vision board doesn't tell you, here's how much I have in resources currently, time, money, energy, etc. Here's how much all this stuff costs. And here's when I want to achieve it by. So how much more do I actually need to make?
Yeah.
Because the 6-pack abs, there's a cost to that. Whether that's I need to hire a trainer, I need to eat differently, that costs money. I need to hire a nutritionist, or I just need 2 more hours a day of free time. Because if I don't get 2 more hours of free time, I'm not going to have the energy to be able to go to the gym. I'm always going to choose something different. Right? So there's cost to each of these things, tangible and intangible. And so we need to take all of those and turn it into a solvable problem so that we can actually measure how much more we need to make and then measure, are our decisions actually getting us closer to that or further away?
I love that. That seems like such a practical step-by-step approach of bringing something down out of the clouds into the tangible. That's my big problem with vision boards and stuff like that too, is because it doesn't make the connection between me, Angie, here with her feet on the ground, and Angie that's way up there in the clouds on, Oprah's bestseller list in her book club.
Yeah.
But how do I get from here to there? I don't have that picture. So I like that idea of breaking it down and especially considering the resources that are available to you, because time and energy are also resources that you 100%. Will need to build your business. Yep.
100%. Yeah. We have to. So I teach this orientation. It's a 180 on what I think the conventional orientation that's being taught, not by you, but by a lot of the, what I'll call charlatans in the marketing space, who are often preying on small business owners because we can be very exploitable, right? You take so much scrutiny and you have so much scrutiny from friends, family, there's expectations. And then there's what you have on your, whatever guilt and shame that you have internally, right? And so consequently, you can fall victim very quickly to the 3 steps that are going to solve my entire world problem. And so when someone's telling me just get up earlier, that's going to solve everything, you're like, I'm in so much pain, I'm going to buy that narrative.
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening is that business owners tell me, and I've worked with thousands of small business owners at this point in the finance space, and then with our Certain to You business, they say, hey, the reason why I started this business is because I want freedom. Right? Have you heard some version of that? People are like, I want freedom.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they give different reasons of what freedom looks like to them, but it's some version of like, I want to define my own future. I want to be able to work when I want to work. I want to be able to retire a spouse or my parents or whatever, do whatever I want to do. And then you look at the system that they build for themselves, and what it ends up being is they're putting in the most amount of effort,
Mm-hmm.
and they're taking on the most amount of risk.
Yep.
And then the consequence of that is that they're left with no options. Right? Because I've taken on so much risk and I'm already putting in so much effort. This has to work. Right.
Yep.
And so then you're left with no options. And so then you built a system where you actually don't have freedom. And so I tell people, we got to do the opposite. You can call it the George Costanza, you know, you can call the Charlie Munger when the answer is not obvious, invert and do the opposite. But instead, we need to reorient ourselves towards least amount of effort.
Yes.
So give all the options. What's the least amount of effort? To your point, pick someone who's lazy, quote unquote lazy. So like, no, they look at all the options. They pick the one that gets the results with the least amount of effort. They have more resources, they have more time. They have least amount of risk. And the consequence of that is you have the most amount of options.
Yes.
That reorientation to me is the framework to build upon to actually start doing something extraordinary, which to me is funding your solvable problem.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever that may be.
Oh, man, that's amazing. I think that we're probably going to be working together in the future, too, because I have in my consulting, in my personal consulting outside of Permission to Kick Ass, I talk to people about finding the low hanging fruit. Because if they've been in business for at least a year and they've been consistently creating content, they've got offers already. All it's going to be is looking at what you have, who your people are, and what you can repurpose into an offer. And often it's coming in and, maybe you have some strategic interviews with people, or you look at reviews and case studies and you do a little data mining to see what people like, what they're getting value out of from you. And then you can kind of reverse engineer that into, well, hey, I'm working on a thing. Who's interested in this? And then you can get a pre-order or a little mini flash sale going. You can get paid to create things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be the hustle and grind yourself into an early grave thing that we've all been taught, especially as we're entering this age where information and, like you said, uniqueness, individuality are more important than ever. If you've got great information and a unique spin on it, that's a potential gold mine, my friend. I'm just saying.
I love what you just shared. And my language would be, that's what you just described, rigging the game, or what someone might also call engineering luck. Like outsiders, like, how does Angie keep doing this? It's like everything she touches just turns to gold. It's like, well, it's keeping yourself in the game. So and recovering these resources that you have and reallocating them to future products, more free time, whatever it is that you prefer. But I see a lot of people who are very busy stepping over dollars to pick up pennies.
Yes. Oh, that drives me nuts.
You're like, you have all these assets right here. Let's just use those and repurpose them or take it. You already have what you need. That's a really hard concept. That embarrassingly took me years. I had a therapist who kept telling me, Dan, when are you going to realize you already have all the answers? And I'm like, that seems pretentious. Like, I don't want to be an arrogant person. Like, I just assume I already have all the answers. He's like, you're not understanding me. It's like, it took hearing that many times over before I realized, every question I keep asking him is a preference. Growing your business is a preference. Yep. There's so many questions that business owners are asking are actually preferences. And so it's like, you actually do already have the answer, because the answer is, what do you want?
I think that was the eye opener about, like, as people started to come to me for coaching, and then I started on coaching, and then I would run into that frustration. If I have the answer, just follow my solution. But then That wasn't working. So I realized I needed to dig deeper into how to be a better coach. So the real eye opener to me was that my job as a coach, when I am coaching someone, is to help them recognize that they've already got the answers and it's just been buried by a bunch of shit.
Yeah.
They're like, we just got to go digging through your brain, get rid of all the messages and all the shoulda, woulda, couldas and the guilt and the emotion and the outside noise, and find that thing in your gut that you've been wanting to do all along and give you permission to do that.
That's great. I hope people truly understand that. It's simple, but it's not easy.
No, not easy at all. And like when I've had coaches do it to me, I've struggled mightily. So I totally get it.
Well, there's so many coaches out there who just tell you to be someone that you're not. And that's the lion's share of the coaches who are like, no, you just need to do Facebook Lives every day for the rest of your life. That's the only way that you're going to be successful. Let's ignore that basically every billionaire has never done a Facebook Live before, but the only way you're going to be successful is by no one could be. And I'm not trying to knock people who like doing that. I'm just, they're asking you to become someone that you're not.
Just be a better person, Dan. Just be a better person.
Just do better. But actually, a great coach, I'm fortunate to have had one for a number of years now. And he says it's the diagnostic framework. His name's Randy Massengale. He used to be a senior advisor to people like Bill Gates.
Oh, wow.
And his whole thing is you have to meet each person at their individual point of need. And that's very difficult to do because you want to insert your own agenda, but truly meeting them in their individual point of need and helping them play their game. I mean, that's what he did for me. Like, the reason why you're not getting the results you want is because you're playing somebody else's game, and that always ends in you being miserable because you can't sustain it.
Yeah.
So stop it.
You don't know the rules of the game because you're not in that person's shoes. You don't have the entirety of the context that they have. So like, invent your own. It's totally cool to make it. It's totally cool to wake up one day and be like, I wonder if I could build a business where I only worked, like Tim Ferriss, 4 hours a week. Is it possible? Absolutely. Is it going to take some effort and some resources and maybe even some hustle to get there? Absolutely. But if you know where you're going, you can find a way to get there.
I think that totally aligned with what you just shared. I think I think language is really important, and we get ourselves in these traps sometime where we think, I just really want a passive business. Like, what you actually want is a reliable business.
Yes.
Those are different. So the only way you can work 4 hours a week and make what you want is if it's reliable. If you built it to where, then it can be more passive. But if you're starting with, I don't want to have to do stuff.
Yeah, that's not a way to build a business.
It's like, hey, here's my business plan. I don't want to do stuff. Like, cool. Like, I totally get it. I don't want to do stuff either. But if the
none of us do.
Yeah, it has to be reliable.
Yeah, I love that distinction too, because I know that a lot of small businesses in particular, going back to what you said about feeling the pain and, being taken advantage of. Sometimes they feel like one thing will solve all their problems. Passive income will solve all my problems. Well, it's never passive. It's always active in some sense of the word. Even if you've got everything automated, somebody needs to be watching the automations in case they break. As you and I are recording today, Thrivecart was down for several hours, and some of my friends were freaking out because nobody could buy anything. Nobody could access the courses they were paying for. It's never passive. But I started joking recently with a girlfriend of mine, what's my vision for my future? Angie's vision for the future is I want to own businesses other people run. I want to invest in new businesses and give people runway and bandwidth to start. But that's where I'm going ultimately with my business, to own businesses other people run for me. That's how I think I'm going to get to minimal hours a week, but that's just me.
Well, that's a totally different framework than starting from, I just want people to pay me money while I don't do anything.
Yeah.
Right. That might ultimately be the outcome, but the nuance is totally different because you're starting, I need to acquire these businesses and have, these certain processes and systems in place, and I'm going to give them runway. And then ultimately the consequence of that is that I'm going to get income with having to do very little.
Yeah. And a whole lot of work has to go into that beforehand. I'm glad that you brought that up because I think the idea of that used to wig me out because that's just not anything I ever grew up with any context around, like owning a business that somebody else ran. I come from a very blue collar background. Both my parents were truck drivers. And my mom became a pastry chef later on. It was kind of a weird transition, but like I've never known anybody that owned a business.
That's not the typical transition.
No. That's a whole long story I'll have to tell another day. But yeah, it's like I just didn't have any frame of reference for that. So the first time I heard myself admit I'd like to own businesses that other people run, I was immediately overcome with terror. How the hell would I do that? Like, I don't even know where to begin to do that. But the beauty of, just taking steps forward toward that is that I've come into contact with individuals who are experts in their own field that I already have in mind for, okay, someday when I'm ready to invest this kind of capital, I'm calling this person for legal structure advice. I'm calling this person for financial advice. I'm going to put together my team who's going to help me make sure that I don't step in it, if at all possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that we're kind of raised in this idea that the way that we make money is through effort.
Yep.
And there's an assumption, a pretty significant assumption that business owners make, which is over time, I'm just going to make more. Mm-hmm. They don't say it explicitly, but it's their actions and behaviors and everything. Like, in other words, it's as if cash flow just comes in because I keep working at it.
Yeah.
Right? And so that understanding, if your mental model is must put in effort, maximum effort to make money, then you have a really hard time understanding how really what you should be making money off of is the value that you contributed.
Yes.
And those are not necessarily correlated. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Like you could have put in very little effort, time, but the value you contributed is tremendous. And therefore you should be compensated accordingly. But absolutely. A lot of folks end up in 50-50 partnerships. I advise everyone, I either want 70% or more or 30% or less. I want to make it really clear what the intentions are, because when we're 50-50, there's an assumption that I'm always going to be contributing my 50%.
Oh.
And so we're watching each other's time. Oh, how much time are you putting in? How much time am I putting in? Mm-hmm. No, it's value.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, like, especially in this information age, I am on a mission to just like squash this notion that time is the value that you deliver. Time is invaluable. Like, it's priceless. It's the non-renewable resource that you have. You only have so much of it. So like at the end of the day, all of us have 24 hours. And if you're spending all of it thinking that if I want to work more, I'll just add more hours, you're going to run out of hours, my friend.
You're going to run out of hours. Yeah. Yeah.
So what else can you create? What else can you do that brings in more value? And I know this is a hard one to wrap your brain around. And I know because I struggled to really understand that too. Like I said, having grown up in a blue collar family, and know you just work hard and you earn more. And maybe you get a raise or maybe you get a bonus, and that's how you earn more. But then when I understood the value of creating something that could be sold many times, an asset, in other words, creating an asset versus just trading time for dollars, that was when my perspective changed. It was actually with an email sequence that was an autoresponder. And so you create it once, you program it to deploy again and again and again, and it makes sales on autopilot. And I know that's like high-level marketer speak that promises people the sun, moon, and stars. But if you do a well-thought-out autoresponder, it can be just set it and forget it, with, of course, people monitoring the tech, as we already discussed.
Sure. Yeah. There's system failure that happens from time to time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But like if we consider ourselves to be in the business of creating assets versus selling our time for money, then I think that changes the name of the game right there.
There's a quote that I like from this guy, W. Edwards Deming, and he says, every system is perfectly designed for the results it gets. Paraphrase roughly. In other words, if you don't like the results, you can be a victim and just be mad about it. That's one option. You could try to change the system, or you could change your behavior.
Yep.
And I think about that quote a lot as I look at my businesses and our behaviors, but most of us have designed a system, not explicitly or consciously necessarily, but that guarantees that we're going to have to work 60, 70 hours a week. And many of us have designed a system where we're going to guarantee that we're working till we're like 65.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have folks in our CPA business where their tax planning up to that point has just been some version of, I just put the maximum amount into the 401k.
Mm-hmm.
And that's cool. That's a strategy. I tell them, well, let's just think about this for a second. So let's just make up an age. You're 35 and you're telling me that you don't want to have to work when you're 45. Doesn't mean you won't work, but you want the option to.
Yeah.
Some people call that FU money. Other people call it financial freedom, whatever. All right. You don't want to have to work. And so what you're doing is to make that happen is every year you're putting in, because you're doing profit share, all this $50,000 into a 401k. You're like, yep, that's exactly what I'm doing. Okay. So when can you take that money out of your 401k? Well, not until I'm 65, unless I want to pay penalties. Okay. But you just told me that your objective is to have financial freedom when you're 45.
Mm-hmm.
So you're tying up all your excess resources first into a 401k that actually got you further away from your objective of having financial freedom at 45. Like, I hadn't thought about it that way. Like, we got to kind of reason through these things. And this is where I come back to solvable problem.
Yep.
For clients and go, truly, what are you optimizing towards? If let's do all these other strategies, 401k might be the last thing just because you have still have excess resources. And that's like legacy. That's money I'm going to give to my grandkids. So I don't really need it ever. So I can wait until I'm 65 before I can access it. But we design these systems that guarantee that we're going to have to keep working.
Yep.
If I was a conspiracy theorist, I would come up with some narrative about it. 401ks were created because it causes people to put their money aside, so they have to keep working till they're 65. I'm not saying that that's the case, but someone might suggest that. I'm not a conspiracy theorist necessarily.
Well, it's not outside the realm of possibility, especially when you consider the modern American education system was built for folks that were going to go to work in factories, that were going to grow up and get a nice pension and a nice retirement. And the entire world has shifted and tilted, and all of that stability has gone away, and new industries have risen, old industries have died, and so on. And so it goes. So that's probably a rant best saved for another day. But I wish the American education system was focused on problem solving and communication and other life skills, because I think of entrepreneurship as just getting really good at both communication and solving problems. Because I'm going to be solving problems until the day I die, even with the business that I've created for myself that has a lot of ease built in, has those long, luxurious mornings that I've always wanted built in, has that laziness built in that I love.
Yeah.
But it's still solving problems on a daily basis. So at least those are problems I want to solve now.
I mean, we could definitely rant on what you just talked about if you want to go down that, right? Because I also have a lot of thoughts on that and kind of personal anecdote. Let's rant away. This is somewhat of an anecdote. About 4 years ago, I got this ocular migraine. My eyes started twitching. It wasn't like a migraine person before, and was kind of freaking out about it. At the same time, my skin was kind of itchy, and I was having stomach issues. I'm like, what is going on? Do I have some sort of serious illness or something? So I go to my primary care doctor, and he's like, okay. And I'm, at the time, a male, well, still male, but 37. 37 years old, male, white guy. And he's like, okay, have you thought about relaxing? And I was like, yeah, I've thought about relaxing.
Gee, thanks, doc.
And that was his sort of recommendation for the migraine and the stomach stuff. It's like, yeah, you probably got some anxiety issue. Like, you just, this is what 37-year-old male with business and some couple kids. Like on average, this would be the problem. So we're going to
Mm-hmm.
start there. And, for the itchy skin, have you thought about lotion? And I was like, I've thought about lotion. My wife has suggested lotion. We own lotion. I've applied the lotion. I'm still itchy.
It has put the lotion on its skin.
Yes, I've lived in this body for 37 years, and I'm telling you, this has not been my normal experience. This is different.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, think about relaxing, go see the eye doctor, and lotion, and check in with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just left cold by that.
Yeah.
But it made sense because it's just personal group indexing.
Mm-hmm.
He looked at me through this. Let's stratify you into these buckets, and this is what an average person at this age would have. And so we give you that diagnosis, and you're on your way. Now, I couldn't accept that, partly because I obsess about things. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to me. So I went down this whole rabbit holes, and it turned out that I was somewhat allergic to blue number 2 dye. And
Wow.
if you look at a lot of the men's healthcare products, the deodorant, the Old Spice deodorant, like it's got the blue stripe in it because blue means fresh. So I'm putting something fresh in my armpits. And you look at the men's body wash, like Old Spice, a lot of them are just a blue gel because we're men and we want blue gels and we're clean now, right? So I was actually bathing in something so the reason why I was so itchy was because I had this food intolerance, like these intolerances to that product. Maybe it took a while to build up, whatever. So I stopped doing that and I stopped being so itchy all the time. And then turned out that like the part of my sinus passage was sort of narrow. And you can do this procedure where they expand it with like a balloon, and it's pretty non-invasive. And all of a sudden my eye twitch and pressure, sinus headaches and everything went away. And stomach thing was kind of another thing. But I kind of went down this rabbit hole and was like, this whole group indexing thing is a real problem.
Yep.
So sort of, taking it, that anecdote, kind of full circle back to like the conversation that we were having. To me, that is sort of this big problem that we have where we're just very quick to bucket, do this, here's the problem, on to the next. And we're not really meeting people, again, at their individual point of need and looking for that distinction and really understanding, who they are, what's going on, etc. So that's like a mental model now I use for folks where I'm like, okay, are you personal indexing where you're looking at the individual, or are you group indexing and you're just making a bunch of assumptions based off like 2 or 3 data points?
Yeah. Oh, I love that distinction too. And good on you for advocating for yourself. Cause I think, it's become very much the norm of accepting that this person knows more than me. They have this much more experience. So I guess I must have gotten it wrong. I think there's a certain value in following your gut. Even if you find out that in the end you were wrong, there's value in pursuing that and finding out if there's merit to your concerns. I'm the same, like I won't even go to a doctor unless it's something that I've never encountered before that I'm freaked out about. So I will lay down the law with a doctor if they tell me, well, this is just, do you know what it took to get me here? Right. If I think it's serious, I think you should be taking it seriously. Otherwise, I'd be a country girl at home, cutting open a sore and draining it myself. Like that's just what we do where I grew up. So yeah, and glad you caught the allergy too, because those things can like randomly turn into something way more serious. So yeah. I like that. Group indexing versus individual indexing. I'm very passionate about that. Like meet people where they are, because I think it's a lot easier than we assume it is as business owners, especially if we are in any kind of industry where we teach one-to-many, right? It's a lot easier to actually just take 5 to 10 minutes here and there to meet someone where they're at and show them, this is where you are. Here are the tools. Here's a tool that you could try. If that doesn't work, we could try something else. But like to bring it back neatly to what you talked about earlier with the one solution, There's no one thing that's going to solve all your problems. So like, let's just keep trying things until we get there. Oh,
yeah, and the whole education system, I think that's what you were commenting on that kind of started me on that rant. It's all based off group indexing, right? Yep. We got a bunch of kids, they're in third grade. Okay, what is a third grader supposed to know? Okay, these couple of things we got to teach to the group.
Mm-hmm.
And in teaching to the group, we don't have the time or the resources to meet with each person individually and help them learn how to problem solve and teach them about cognitive reasoning skills.
Yep.
Not just, the distributed property. Now, I think the distributed property is cool. Like, I want my third grader to know that. But at the same point, what I really want her to know is to be able to reason on her own and be able to solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
Because guess AI can do the distributed property now.
Yeah.
Good to know, but back to the distinction, it becomes problematic if you can't figure out these problems.
Oh yeah, it was funny. I feel like I made this joke recently with somebody because we had those fancy graphing calculators when I was in school doing math.
Oh yeah, the TI-82 or
TI-83.
Yeah,
all the ones that we basically made early computer games on and goofed off in class. Yeah. Those teachers used to tell us, pay attention, show your work. You're not going to have a calculator in your pocket when you grow up. I beg to differ. Yeah. Tell that to my smartphone. I have a calculator in my pocket.
What did those teachers know anyway?
It's helpful to know these things, but like the root behind the problem solving, I think the way of thinking is more important to me than the actual precise mathematics. You may disagree with me since I know that you have a lot of numbers in math in your profession.
Well, there's a whole, in the accounting space, there's a whole thing about rules versus principles. And the accounting world moved to principle-based accounting 20 years ago or so. Mm-hmm. In other words, we can't write all the rules to cover every single situation. So we have to more give a way of thinking. Mm-hmm. And that does create gray areas, but there were gray areas when there were explicit rules too. Yeah. So there's gray areas either way. So let's focus more on the way of thinking through and the principles as opposed to just trying to be so prescriptive.
Mm-hmm. I think that's such a good summary for basically the entire conversation that we've had. Like, business is a way of thinking. Mm-hmm. And all it is really just learning how to think differently from the frame of reference that most of us have, which is employee. So if you're listening and you feel like you're struggling and you're just never getting it, might just be the way of thinking needs to shift. Mm-hmm. And you haven't yet met that person who can meet you where you're at and show you, here's the little bit that helps it click into place and makes that vision a little bit more clear. And then I start to understand it a little bit more. But it's coming. Stick with it. It's coming.
I think that was perfectly said. I don't think I could say it better than that.
Awesome. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm just now noticing the picture over your shoulder of Ron Swanson, which of course they can't see this video, but I'm getting big grin about it. Don't half-ass one thing, or don't half-ass two things. Whole-ass one thing. That's a good quote.
That is a great Swansonism, and there's so many more. There's so many great ones from that character. Maybe it's got to be top 5 best TV characters of all time.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So tell us a little bit more where we can find out about you. I'm going to make sure they have clickable links in the show notes and everything, but I want to hear it from you.
Yeah, certaintytools.com is probably the best sort of jumping off point. That has some articles and things that I'm writing, that has links to my podcast, my book, other businesses, all of that. At certaintytools.com is probably the best place.
Awesome. This has been this wasn't anything like I expected, and it has been so wonderful. I hope you had a great time because I've loved having you on the show.
Well, it's not every day that you meet a business person, so.
That's all for now. If you want to keep that kick-ass energy high, please take a minute to share this episode with someone that might need a high-octane dose of "you can do it." Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the Permission to Kick-Ass podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you stream your podcasts. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and I'm here rooting for you. Thanks for listening, and let's go kick some ass.